All right. So many of our discussions, we've said this before, but so many of our discussions literally begin with one of us prefacing, this could be a really bad idea, and then we give an idea. Okay.
Right.
So today, this could be a really bad idea. What I want to do is I want to just talk about as many random topics as we possibly can, some of the hot topics of culture, some a little bit more lighthearted. But here's the reason why, is I really do think we've lost the ability to have discussions about things that we don't agree on.
Yeah.
And I want simply to model for people a rhythm of what healthy communication can look like. So I want to start on a more serious note, and then we're going to hop into the topics. Whenever we are really emotionally invested in something and then someone speaks against it, there's just the reality that we have a response to it. Our adrenaline kicks in. I don't know what it's like for you. You can talk about it. For me, I will physically get warm. Like I will sometimes sweat when like I get upset, and like I'm like, oh, my heart gets going faster. There have even been times where I've read something and I've gotten lightheaded, because like my adrenaline's going. And so like for me, I've recognized just like a healthy rhythm is to recognize that emotion that it hits something. But also I recognize that's not the time to respond.
For sure. And I think the deeper you feel emotionally or any kind of invested, it might even be your time, the deeper invested you are, the bigger those feelings become. Mm-hmm. So like, just as like a funny example, me and Kenny, who's a guy who works here on staff, one of my best friends in the whole world, we were playing a board game at one point, and we were like 4 hours into it. It's called Settlers of Catan, and we probably didn't talk for like 3 weeks afterwards. Because I didn't remember who lost, but we were so mad at each other by the end. Because even just time-wise, you're so invested at that point. There's another time where me, you, and a couple guys played Risk for hours, and somebody, I'm not going to say who it was, got a little upset. Yeah. Because, just anytime you're super...
just hypothetical, let's just say Mackie. Just like make up a name.
His name rhymes with Schmacky, I'm not going to say his name. But he just got bummed. But that's the nature of humans. The more invested we are into something, whether it be your time, your energy, your emotions, something you deeply care about, that's right. And I get the same thing. I'll read on Facebook, someone will say something that I really disagree with, an issue that I really care about, and I just get hot behind the ears, and I'm like, this is all the things that I think. And
Yeah, I think it's good to recognize that emotion and to also recognize when it's good to respond and when it's not.
Yeah.
And then also to recognize not everything has to have a response. Like one of the things I've done, I don't know if you've done this, I have written so many responses that I've never sent.
Yeah.
I've written them out. I've actually gotten in the habit of writing it in a different program. So like I won't like respond on Facebook or like hit reply on an email. I'll open like Word or something and start typing it out because if I'm going to send it, I want to be able to edit it, and I just don't even want the chance I could accidentally send, and then like I can't undo that. And there are times I think it's even good if you're going to respond. I'm talking obviously in the written form, to get someone else that's not as emotionally invested to read your response.
Yeah.
Because
for sure.
I think, like I know at times I'll give it to my wife, and my wife she is very, very intelligent, has incredible thoughts about things, but is also way more at peace than I am.
Sure, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like she's just so even keel that there are times I'll give it to her and she'll go, like she'll read it and she's so kind, but she'll go, the content is good, the emotion is not.
Yeah, and I think that's something that all of us, anyone who feels things big like that, that's the goal, is to be more like Mary in that regard. You can still feeling passionate and feeling, that's not the problem.
Right.
Even getting upset when you read it, that's probably not even a problem. Sometimes things should make you frustrated, probably. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, sometimes something should bum you out and be like, no, I really disagree with that. But to be able to take that, I think the mature response, and well, it's really a challenge for me, is to take that maturity that Mary has in that situation and say, can I say something that might be true, right, and good, but still honor them, still be kind, to still love them well in that moment? And I think we see that in the Bible all the time, of like people disagreeing but still being able to love each other in that process. Yeah. So I think that's, to me, is the goal of this stuff. Not necessarily saying quit being mad at stuff. Like, okay, I know myself, not going to happen. I'm going to get mad at stuff often, Right. But what do I do with that? Can I put that in its proper place?
Yeah, and so when I'm writing, so like even the example I just gave, when Mary goes, the content is good, the emotion is not, I will then go back, and this is actually a constant rhythm of mine, is I write out content first, like here's the response, here's the facts of like my point of view, and then I go back and I make it flowery. That's the term that I would use, because I'm not by nature that way. I am a very direct communicator, which I've had to learn like how to preface stuff. Like even with the staff, like I'll say, I'll have to give them my emotion before I give them the statement. And I'll say like, here's what I'm thinking. I'll just understand this. But anyway, to go back to the writing and go, okay, here's the facts. Now I'm going to add some flowery language as a way to honor the person to go, okay. And, whether it even be something as simple as a smiley face, which again is not my natural bent to do that. And you can then soften something. And what that does is it allows the other person to not feel like they're being attacked or threatened.
Yeah.
And it allows them to engage it. And I've even seen it on social media. And I'm not perfect at this because there are times I just get upset and, I can respond. But I've seen people that I can tell they're amping up.
Yeah.
And then my response calms them down. Because I've actually had people say to me, like, I'm sorry, I was too fired up the last time, because they realize I'm not meeting their energy.
Yeah.
So I'm going the other extreme, and they're like, okay, wait, we're not arguing. And I think there's almost some of that happens because when you're right, it doesn't capture your emotion. And so some people I think, oh, we're fighting.
Sure.
And you're like, no, we're
and that's
not.
that
We're not
initial
fighting.
posture. Yeah, and I think there's so much power in being able to create that experience for people. If you can bring it down, show them you're not fighting. My go-to strategy nowadays is to start by confirming what I agree with what they said. Mm-hmm. So this is a super hot button issue right now, but even that, I think it's a good example because it's a hot button issue, like white privilege. So I was having a dialogue with a friend about white privilege, and he gave his case on why he thinks it's a silly word and why it's a silly expression. And my first response to him wasn't, you're wrong or you're dumb and here's 5 reasons why. Mm-hmm. It was, I hear what you're saying. It would be upsetting to feel like you went through your life and nothing was really handed to you. Now someone's implying that you did.
Sure.
I get that that's frustrating. Here's another perspective. And that's like now my default thing is I want to try to, if there's anything in what you said that I can agree with or confirm, or even if I can't, almost to mirror what they said and say, so here's what you're saying. Mm-hmm. I can understand that. Here's a different point of view. All of a sudden you feel that tension leave a little bit because it's not so much fists up, it's a conversation about different perspectives. Mm-hmm. And that is where I found, now some people want to be frustrated, and even me, and I know how that is because even when I'm frustrated, if somebody does that with me, I can still feel myself. No, I want to be angry. Sometimes it's just part of like the human experience. But I think things like that, going back and looking over with softer language that honors people, talking about what you agree on first and then jump into the different perspectives. I think that kind of stuff really helps soften the entire experience. And all disagreements then don't feel like this awkward thing where, oh, now we're arguing, or man, we can't bring it up now. All of a sudden, it's just an experience to talk about stuff, and it's almost welcomed rather than like, how it is that awkward family dinner of like, oh, I hope so-and-so doesn't bring up the thing that he always brings up. Because because it's going to make the other guy mad, then I'm going to get mad, then we're all fighting about it. All of a sudden, it's almost opportunity where I look forward to sitting around with friends and talking about hard conversations because I know we're good at honoring each other and agreeing on things and talking about. Yeah,
I love what you do because I've seen you do it on social media frequently, where you acknowledge the part of the other person's argument that you can understand, you can even agree with. Because I think like what it's shown me, because like you read it and you go like, oh, that feels right. Why does that feel right? Yeah. And I think it is because when we're discussing, what makes us more frustrated than anything is when the person is not hearing us.
Wow.
And I get, like when you write something, you take all the time, and then that person, we've joked about it before, where the person basically responds, no.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, no, I put so much energy into that. You have to engage it. But when a person says, I hear you, there's just a part of that emotionally takes you down. So like Mary and I, when we're arguing with each other, we've learned to do this rhythm in our marriage, is to do that, to say, okay, I hear what you're saying. So recently, we were having a discussion about something that wasn't a big topic. It was just something that we were making plans for our vacation. And we were talking about it, and we were kind of frustrated. But then we both stopped and said, okay. And I said to her, here's what I hear. I hear what you're saying, and I understand that. I'm emotionally feeling this way. And then she said, I hear what you're saying. And it was just like, there's no way to be mad at that point. It was like our defensiveness went down. And then we just had a better discussion. And we weren't mad and fired up, but it was just like, it just took it to a calm where you go, you know what, I don't have to fight for something. We're now having a discussion. And I think that's where we're trying to get to is, how can you have a discussion instead of feeling like you have to fight for something? Yeah,
and that's such a game changer when we're talking about conversation in general. So, I had a vulnerable thing. I had my first argument with my family probably in years, like where I was arguing with my mom and my dad, and it was intense. It reminded me of being in high school when you argue about stuff. And I had this moment where I was really honest with them, and I said, because I was being rude, like I was in the wrong. About the topic of conversation, I don't even remember, but I was being wrong in my delivery. I was being too intense, too rude. And I was really vulnerable with them, and I said, I think I have a problem when I feel unheard. I lose it. Like I just get so frustrated. It becomes so hard for me to be reasonable, to not be rude. It almost feels like when I feel unheard, I have to overcompensate with really intense, extreme language and argumentative stuff. that hurts as a person when you don't feel heard. So I feel like the moment that you can just honor somebody and make them feel like you're hearing and understanding them, it becomes way easier to have that conversation, because now that part's off the table almost.
Right.
I don't have to worry about not being heard. They heard me. Now we're just talking about the idea. The moment I feel unheard, now this new part of the conversation almost is talking about, why aren't you hearing me? And that almost becomes the argument now.
Man.
It overtakes the whole thing, and you lose sight of what you're actually dialoguing about.
Yeah, that is so good. I mean, because that is I think an accurate summary of what's going on in our culture right now is a bunch of people feeling like they're not being heard.
Yeah.
And because they're not.
Yeah.
Because people are not listening anymore.
Right.
And I know for me, it takes effort to hear someone, because, so I'm going to say something that's super condescending, and I'm recognizing that I'm wrong. I'm just saying it's condescending. I read some people's responses on things, and I think, that's the dumbest thing I've ever read.
Yeah.
Like that's
seriously.
so dumb, because it's easy for me to be arrogant to go like, because my perspective is so wise,
Yeah, sure.
And I've had to get into a conscious effort to go, why are they feeling that way? So sometimes it's not even saying what are the specifics of their argument. It's what's the emotion behind it. Why are they feeling that way? Because like even in politics, you'll see people that are like, I want to be vague enough because I don't even want to have this discussion right this second, but where people that are, the people who are not oppressed, all of a sudden becoming the victims. And you go, like, it's so easy to go like, oh, you're not the oppressed person. Why are you being the victim? But I think that's the easy thing to do, to condemn. It's to go, okay, wait a second. Something's hitting them emotionally. Yeah. And that's just as valid as a person who's legitimately being oppressed by someone. And so like to try to put yourself in their shoes, honestly, is the most loving thing to do, because it helps you understand better so that you can communicate in love, hopefully to get them to come toward a place that really is truth or health. And like what we've talked about, and sometimes it helps you learn something that you didn't know you needed to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much humility in that. The background on my cell phone right now, because I think it's a powerful reminder, is like one of the best forms of protest is empathy. And that hit me so hard, because it's like, my goodness, like if you can take the time to stop feeling like you have to form an opinion every 5 seconds about everything. I go back to even something you told me, man, this had to have been a couple months into me working here. So this is 5 years ago. You telling me like, I think I asked your opinion on something. And you're like, I don't have an opinion on it. And I just remember being floored of like, what? like as a person who grew up largely with social media, like MySpace came around when I'm in like 8th grade. So a lot of formative years for me were so much giving people a platform to always have an opinion all the time. Yeah. And for you to say that was almost this release of like, maybe I don't. And even that concept, if I can maybe not form an opinion right now and just empathize, like that is the best way to protest the awful things that are happening. Yeah. Just to understand and hear someone and love them and see where they're coming from before I feel like I have to make any huge, bold statements. And like we're talking about, it makes people feel heard, makes them feel honored, and it removes the conversation from this argumentative place of like, well, now we're against each other because you're a Democrat and I'm a Republican. Now we're against each other. And it puts it in almost its proper place of like, we love each other. We have different ideas. Yeah. And then that's where it becomes fun to talk about those ideas, because you're 100%. Empathizing and you're in this place of understanding.
Yeah. There's one of my favorite books. I read it when I was a kid. It's actually one of the few books that I've read multiple times, called Ender's Game. It's a science fiction movie. Scientific, made me sound really smart there for a second. Science fiction book.
It's a scientific book.
But Ender is this character that, I'm not going to go into all the details, but he's this guy that he's a kid that they're using to fight against the aliens. And he has a quote in the book where he says, "To fully know your enemy is to love them." Yeah. And I remember like as a kid not fully understanding that, but as I got older, I got what he was saying. When you so put yourself in the shoes of another person to fully understand them, you can't help but love them, because you become like them, like you think like them. And I think that's the goal, is to say, not that we're always going to agree with our enemies, but is to try to understand them to the point where you go, I can love them. I can show compassion.
How crazy is that to even say, you're still my enemy? Because it doesn't say the best way to make someone not an enemy is to know them, then to love them. They're still your enemy, so we can take the most evil, wicked people that we would view an enemy, right? We can still love them. We can still know them. We can still empathize to the point, and I think that is where true health comes in, and even we're going to jump into some crazy topics, and that, and what we want to do is just that exemplify that we can disagree, we can have different points of view, but I'm still going to hang out with you at work. We're still going to be friends. I'm still going to submit to your authority as the lead pastor of this church. We're still going to love each other. Because we have differing opinions, it won't impact our relationship at all because we have this foundation of empathy and loving each other and hearing each other and listening to each other. There's power in that.
All right, so you ready to start hitting some topics?
Yeah, let's do it.
I have a list, and then also recently I posted on Facebook, and I just said, hey, what are some things that get people fired up? So I'm going to hop back and forth between our list, Facebook. We're not going to talk super long on each topic. The goal is not to do a complete podcast on each one. Some of these we're going to come back to in the future weeks and do a full thing on it. But we're just going to kind of go through and talk about it. And what we're trying to model is give a couple of perspectives of it, one side. And so we're not necessarily taking this posture saying we endorse this point of view. We're just trying to give a different point of view because I think we've done some homework in our lives to try to understand these super hot topic things. Because what happens is oftentimes the hot topic comes out, one side that we already agree with takes a really harsh stance, and we just embrace that as gospel truth.
Right.
And we need to take a step back and go, okay, hold on. What's the other side? Why does someone who loves our country, someone who loves God, why do they feel that way? And that's what we're trying to do.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So let's go. Let's start off with the statues. All right. So let's just get right out there. So we have statues in our country that are being taken down, and they're Confederate generals and leaders, and people are getting fired up about it. So one side of it is the history is being erased. It's being removed. The other side is this is what needs to be done. Go ahead and speak to whatever side you want to, and then I'll go to the other side.
So, we were talking prior of even how to handle some of these issues because you and I are kind of like-minded on some stuff. But what we're both going to try to do is just even if this isn't my viewpoint, I want to do my best job to represent that viewpoint so we can exemplify like that discourse in a healthy way. So the best arguments I've heard about statues are
keeping the statues,
keeping the Confederate flag up on stuff. The heritage argument is really compelling in the sense of this is something that means something very deep to me and my people. It represents my history, represents my ancestors, represents core common values that we were founded on. And by eliminating that, I think people are so intimately tied to their history, it feels like you're literally removing a piece of them.
Right.
That's how we view, my mom is such a good example of something that she literally is a part of her identity is her Irish heritage. Okay. I've never met a person in my entire life who loves anything like that. She loves Ireland. I don't even think she's ever been to Ireland, but her password for everything has to do with something Irish.
And you just gave out a secret.
But her, all that stuff. Her email is like Sunny Shamrock. Something like she's just that's her thing. She always likes to wear green clothes. Even Mary, she's favorite color is green. Yeah. They just so much love their heritage. And we even joked around with her when she took the ancestry thing of like, if it comes back, she's Russian, we're going to lose it. It's going to be so funny because she just cares so deeply about it, and her whole family does. They have such a pride in that. And when I think about that, I try my best to empathize with those people, saying like, her heritage is a piece of who she is. Mm-hmm. That's how she really views it. It's a part of my identity, and her core values are shaped around that, things that she cares about. So when I look at people who lived in the South during that time, they look at these were their heroes. These were the people that they heard folk stories about. And they view it as not only a dishonoring of their heritage and of their history, but as a part of their identity and who they are. Then the other side of it that you often hear is like a libertarian states' rights point of view. Yeah. It's like, hey, they were arguing for states' rights to be able to be separate from the government, to make their own decisions. That's what the war was over. I was talking to you earlier about like, imagine if like most of our federal taxes went to our state government instead. You'd see states improve, roads are better, all that stuff. So I'm trying my best to empathize with where they're coming from and saying, like, I can see how that's a part of your heritage, and I can see why that might get you really upset about somebody coming down to, rip down your stuff.
Yeah, and I saw a guy make an argument recently that he was saying one of the dynamics of every generation is that they've embraced dysfunctional things because no one has questioned it yet. Yeah. And so once someone questions it, then when they respond well to it, we should honor those people for it. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So like there are dysfunctional things in every generation that we just don't realize are bad. And then it needs to be a new point of view. So like we go back and slavery was just a thing. And so there are some people that they were just embracing it. Again, an evil thing, an absolute evil thing. But once it was confronted, some of them responded and some of them didn't. Okay, so there's some arguments that way. Then there's a flip side of it, obviously, that when you really study it, a lot of those statues were erected during times where they were really trying to oppress black people in different communities. And just the same way, so I'm giving like the counter argument, the same way that in Germany, if there were statues erected to the generals who killed the Jews, and they had them everywhere. It's not a part of history at that point. These are statues that are honoring evil men. And I think that's what we have to be sensitive toward as a culture, is we look at, like for black people, they go and they see a statue of a man who tried to fight for enslaving black people.
Yeah.
And so that's why they're wanting to remove them. I think we both agree that a better place would be a museum,
Sure.
some type of
Yeah.
place where, even an outdoor facility where it could talk about the history and you could see the statue. But I think having them in places of honor is consistently sending a message to black people in those communities. This is our value system.
Yeah.
This person needs to be honored, and that's the challenge right now. So people that want to take them down, they're not trying to erase history. They're trying to remove hurtful things that are still an image of oppression of their people.
Yeah, for sure. And let's talk about the really practical side of this then. Let's say that's your stance of like, hey, I see it as to honor the people who are living, man, let's take down stuff because they view it as a reminder of oppression. If I'm saying, hey, it's my heritage, what can we agree on in this situation? You know what I mean? Like where can we look at it and say we're both people, we have a differing idea, like what can unify us in spite of a very different ideal? And for me, the first thing that comes to mind is this idea that we're both essentially asking for the same thing, it just looks different, and that can unify us. You're saying, hey, I want to do my best to honor people who have been marginalized historically, black people. Right. Like they went through this really difficult time. I want to honor them. I don't want them to feel unwelcome because they see a statue of someone who fought for slavery. And for me, I'm asking for the same thing of like, well, I want honor for the people who believe this and for Southerners and all this stuff. So I think if we can identify in that, like, hey, we're just trying to love people best.
Right.
And if we can sit there and say, hey, we disagree on this, that's okay. Obviously, here's the reality. I would want to convince you of my side. You'd want to do the same thing because we want, we view it as healthier. But if we can at least empathize with each other and say, at the end of the day, you're trying to love people of the South the best, and I'm trying to love black people the best, right? And I think that is where you can call it and say, all right, we're different, but we're the same.
Yep.
It's the same goal here. We're going about it in different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to speed up because if we talk that long on every topic, we're going to. All right. So do you like Star Wars, the movies?
Yeah, I love Star Wars.
Okay, so we're a little bit different generation. How old are you?
I'm 27.
You had to think about that. That's pretty funny.
26. Yeah, I'm 27. Born in 92, so I'm 27.
Okay, 27. I'm 41, so we're a little bit different. All right, so you were raised just kind of knowing all of the Star Wars movies, besides the most recent ones you released, right?
Right. So the prequels that came out, that was when I was like in elementary school.
So were you able to see them in order, or did you see? Okay, so Jar Jar Binks. What's your thoughts? Did you like him? Not like him?
So I think Jar Jar Binks is one of the most underrated characters.
Okay, so you're wrong, right?
I think that he's a subtle genius.
Okay.
The fact that what would be perceived as essentially a functioning idiot could overthrow a government gives me hope. Big fan of Jar Jar Binks.
I felt like the second prequel needed to begin with Jar Jar Binks dying the most violent death possible, and then not even acknowledging it. It just is their way of saying like, our bad.
Yeah, that was our fault. Man, I saw such a funny joke. It was like the third movie where he didn't play a role at all, but the very intro scene, he was just in a room and he almost looks at the camera. I'm still here.
Yeah, right. All right, so Lord of the Rings movies.
Sure, best ever. Some of the best media that's ever come out in the history of this. It was actually Australia, but in the history of the world. I was going to say this country. History of forever.
I hated those movies more than I've ever hated movies ever. Like literally.
Like what's one reason why?
Okay, so in defense of the movies, that's not my genre. And they came out on Wednesday nights. I was a youth pastor in Detroit, so I would do youth ministry, and then we would go and see like the 10:30 showing of them. Each of those movies is like 17 hours long. They're the longest movies. The entire movie is just this stupid creature trying to find the ring. And I was like, is that right? Get the ring or keep the ring? I can't remember at this point.
Matthew.
I can't remember. I blocked it out of my brain.
They have the ring. They're trying to drop it off at Mount Doom.
Yeah, and I was rooting for that guy to die like the entire time.
That's the next level of hate. Like, I want the main character to not make it.
Yeah, I realize how violent I say.
You start rooting
for die, and that little, what's his name, Gollum or something? Gollum. Yeah, he needed to die. Okay, so all right, so let's talk about kneeling right now. So 2 different types of kneeling. There is, in some of the protests, there have been authority figures such as congressmen and women, city council members, police officers that have kneeled in response to people.
Sure.
As a sign of respect. People have flipped out about it, and so I'm going to kind of just talk about my opinion, and I don't know that you can even give a counterpoint on this one, but people have been upset about that, and what came out in response to it is people said, I don't kneel for anyone but God. Okay?
Yeah.
And because that's what that looked like. And to me, that felt a little bit disingenuous because we understand the difference between kneeling out of worship and kneeling out of respect.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
so like, you don't see anyone, when someone kneels down to propose to someone in marriage, you don't see anyone comment, I only kneel before God.
Yeah.
Because they understand the difference. And yet it really gets people fired up about it. The other kneeling is Colin Kaepernick started the process of protesting during the national anthem. And so he's kneeling. That's not out of, some would say, I think, that it is, in one part, a sign of respect while a sign of protest.
Yeah.
And people get fired up about that. Do you have any thoughts about either one of those?
Yeah. So in general, I think kneeling before any person, I can see how that would be a jarring image because you want, like, when you're brought up with this mentality that some things are sacred, to see someone do a sacred act before something that they deem unsacred, it would be probably upsetting.
Right.
Now, I'll admit, I agree with you. I do think if we view human beings as sacred and worthy of honor and in our love and that
we'll be
empathy,
clear, we're not talking about bowing down.
No, very different. And we're also not talking about worshiping.
Yeah.
We're talking about the act of kneeling in front of somebody. As many countries, some bow, some kneel. Of like when you see someone, they do like a head nod. Every community has a way to honor and respect people, and I will always be an advocate for honoring and respecting people. But I do understand if you're used to something being sacred, and that's even a huge problem with that people view as the viewing of Colin Kaepernick taking a knee before the flag. I've never served in the military, but I can understand people who they have family members who you hear it all the time. Hey, my grandfather died for that flag,
For sure.
and this is, and it feels so disrespectful to them. And where I think that middle ground is understanding exactly what we just talked about with the statues. You're both literally arguing the same thing. So Colin Kaepernick is saying, like, what if I love, or I don't know him personally, but people who kneel in general,
Right.
I think
the initial background of that is, if people forget that when he started protesting, he was just sitting during the national anthem. And then he talked to a veteran who encouraged him to kneel, who said, there's a better way.
Respectful.
There's a better way to do this. And the better way to do this is to kneel because it still honors the flag, but yet is still protesting.
Yeah.
And I think some people have lost sight of that. And again, I get it. That is a jarring image because if you have fought for the flag, if you have a loved one who has, you hold it in such high esteem that any behavior that looks like it's demeaning that is jarring and it's upsetting. But to understand the perspective that people saying, I'm not dishonoring it. Like I'm letting you know what my kneeling is signifying. I'm respecting it, but I'm protesting something else. I'm not protesting the flag in America per se.
Yeah.
I'm protesting the injustices that I perceive that are happening.
The most powerful example of that was actually that guy who suggested that he kneeled. There's an image of them standing together at the same time before, as the song is playing, as people, where Colin Kaepernick is on a knee, and right next to him, standing at his side, is the guy who gave him the advice, the vet, who did the more traditional approach, where he had his hand over his heart. They disagreed on the way to do it, in the sense he's like, well, I'm not going to kneel. I think maybe kneel instead of sit because it's more respectful. I can never do it. So they both have different, but they both understood that they both had the same goal.
Yeah.
Colin Kaepernick loves the country, or anyone taking a knee, because I don't know him individually, but they love the country so much that they're saying, I'm willing to use this as an act of protest because I love America, because I want better, because I want racial equality. I'm willing to do a hard thing and to take a really intense stance that might be jarring. And on the other hand, it's the same exact thing of like, I love America, I love this country, I'm going to honor it the best. So again, it's that empathy point. Yeah. Can we agree that like we want the same thing here? We disagree on method, and that becomes a conversation that's worth having. But the moment that it becomes, you're disrespectful, you're this, you've lost sight of the fact that, dude, they want the same exact thing. Right. They love America enough to say we can do better. Yeah.
All right, so let's pivot again to a new topic. Wearing mask is a really hot topic, and it's a hot topic on many levels. So on one side, it's the people are arguing, is it effective? Is it even healthy to wear a mask? But more so, what's really causing people to get fired up is that it's being mandated. Yeah. That the government is forcing states to do it, cities to do it, governors are doing this, and people do not like well, I'll say it in the most general sense. They don't like to be told what to do in general. I mean, there's that natural rebellion that we have, but even more specifically, when it feels like it crosses a line to removing our rights as citizens, it becomes disturbing to people. And so on one side of the argument, you have people that are like, I'm an American, you can't take away that right, I have the right, I know the risk. And then the other side is a compassionate side in the sense of people saying, but I want to do whatever is necessary to protect people's lives. Both are wanting freedoms. Both of them are wanting healthy lives. They just see a different way to get to that point.
Yeah. Can I ask you like a real tough question?
Yeah.
What are your, outside of the fact that we both believe that we should submit to biblical authority as referenced in like 1 Peter and really tons of places, but Romans, what is your genuine, like just your personal opinion on wearing a mask? Do you think it's efficient? Do you think it's like misguided?
So I'll be super vulnerable. I don't think we should wear masks. Again, here's what I'm saying. I wear a mask. I think we should honor the government. So I just want to get you prefaced it, but I want to say that because I don't want this to be a sound clip that people edit put out. Matt's a hypocrite.
He said it.
Yeah, he said it. My personal thing is I think there's been so much misinformation about it. I think in the beginning the beginning part was don't buy masks, don't wear masks. This is, don't make your own home mask. It doesn't work. I mean, even government officials, now they're saying it does. There's been so much disinformation, misinformation. I actually think, so I have a theory. So this is my conspiracy theory, okay? Because we're going to talk about conspiracy theories in a moment.
All right, gotcha.
Here's my conspiracy theory. I think the government is manipulating the information as a way to handle the people who wouldn't obey them that need to obey them. So what I mean by that is, I think the people who have symptoms and the people who are legitimately sick need to wear masks, and the government knows that people just won't do that. Yeah. Like people will go, because I know personally situations where people had symptoms, were around sick people, went and got tested, and before the results came in, went to parties and hung out with people. And so in response to that, the government just says, hey, a small group won't be compassionate enough, smart enough, whatever term you want to use. So we're just going to mandate everybody. So we're going to lie about things in order. So that's my conspiracy theory that I think probably has some truth to it. So that's one side of it. That said, as a Christian, I believe in submission to authority. And as a part of our community, I'm going to err on the side of doing what seems to be the most compassionate thing, because I know when I go out in public, I'm a public face.
And you'd rather gamble on the compassionate side.
And that's why I want to gamble on it. So like my response is honestly in private is like if I'm talking with you, it's going to be like, that's a stupid. Masks are dumb. I don't like wearing them. Honestly, they give me a headache. And I don't like it. I have a big head, so they're uncomfortable on that. I sweat easy, so I don't like that part of it. I also feel like we all know the risk, and so let people be adults. But again, I just feel like, you know what? I need to submit to authority because that's what God's called me to do, and I want to be compassionate.
And on that one specifically, we on multiple issues, here's where I found myself landing. I almost always find myself, whether consciously or subconsciously, landing on the side of, and it might be foolish, but just to say, just listen to the smart people. So I think in that sense, it's more rare for me to look for the conspiracy of like, this is why, this is the agenda behind it. For me, when I hear the mask thing, I'll agree with all of that. I literally the first time I wore a mask, I legitimately thought, I get it.
Like you get the argument against it.
This is a bummer. It's uncomfortable. I feel like I'm just like sweat and breath all over my face. I just hated it. But so for instance, another thing you and I actually disagree on is probably climate change. We both agree we should be stewards of the earth. So again, it's good. We can find unifying stands. We both agree we should be good stewards.
And you just pivoted to climate change.
But because that's like my general feeling. Like I said, I don't even know why. It wasn't a conscious decision. I generally look to, hey, if a scientist tells me to do it, and he's in front of a bunch of people, he's like, someone endorsed him, whether it be the government or otherwise. My whole thing is like, they're smart, I'm dumb, I'll do it. You know what I mean? Right. Now, there are a lot of people, it's what you just said. You're on the other side where it's like, there could be 100 other reasons why, and they're using that. Yeah. For me, my inclination is usually just do what the smart people say and like let that be enough, whether it be all scientists saying global warming and climate change. I'm much more inclined to say probably, just because I put that kind of trust in. And there are a lot of people who don't, but again, that unifying stance is the fact that like, okay, we can disagree there, but again, looking at climate change, we both agree that we should take care of the earth. Right. We disagree with like the side of like, hey, science, just because you're a scientist doesn't mean you're trustworthy. Where me, I'm much more inclined to say like, but probably, so I'll trust him.
Yeah. So you think climate change is happening and you think it's man-made?
Yeah, I do. I think that just from like a 30,000 foot view, the amount of people here and the amount of stuff we're doing is almost unprecedented. So you have the Industrial Revolution, where all of a sudden we're burning things for energy now and like all this stuff. And it's almost in my head, the whole Occam's razor thing. The simplest answer feels the most likely.
Right.
Just the volume of what people do now that could impact, even from a visual standpoint. You have smoke in the air now.
Sure.
You have all this stuff. To me, it feels like we're probably doing something. So if the scientists are saying we're doing something, I usually throw my hat in and be like, sure, I'm in.
Okay.
That's more my perspective on climate change.
Yeah, I think climate change is happening and it's not man-made. So
Sure.
That's where I fall on that argument is, they've said that the planet has had a ebb and flow to it, where it's increased and decreased in temperature. And it just seems disingenuous to me when they say, now this is happening, but we're sure it's man-made. So that's where I fall on that.
No,
so.
and I totally get that. You and I've had this conversation a couple times, not a ton, but a couple times where it really is, there's no real answer to it.
Right.
We don't have studies long enough to even see where.
Because like 20, 30 years ago, everyone was convinced we were getting colder.
Yeah.
And so we're going toward a new ice age and stuff. And so that's a part I'm a little bit jaded by.
For sure.
What feels like disingenuous communication and information.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit more of a skeptic when it comes to that kind of stuff. I think that's one thing that probably shocked most people, because I talk so consistently about like submission to authority and different things.
You would blow people's minds if they knew your candid thoughts.
Yeah, I'm skeptic on it.
For sure.
And the reason I want to say this is that I don't think it makes me a hypocrite, and I'm not being disingenuous, is to say I'm wrestling with these things. So I don't find submission an easy concept.
Oof, that's good.
It's not that I'm like, yay, I want to submit to every idea.
Right.
It's that I go, I really, really trust Jesus.
Yeah.
And I know he knows what's best. And I think this person's a bad leader. I think this is a bad decision. This is a bad law. But it's not unbiblical. It's not immoral. It's not unethical. And so...
But it's so easy because of that stance, because you're an advocate for really submitting to the Bible, submitting to God at that point.
Yeah.
People draw a lot of conclusions.
Yeah, for sure.
So someone literally, I remember, I don't think I was there when they said it, but I remember you telling me that someone really assumed for like weeks that you were a Democrat, just because like a couple weeks you said something that may have been like, a little bit more. But the fact is, like, I know you personally, and I know you're not a Democrat. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. That goes back to we did a service where we had people fill out cards, and then during the service we just said like, these are different needs. Who can fill this need? And so it was like this one family, I think one of their first Sundays there, and they just thought that was the most incredible like social gospel, social justice type things.
Yeah.
And then I think in the upcoming weeks after that, I spoke out against the Christian attachment to a political party, which is obviously the Republican Party, and which I was a part of, in the sense of like I had a George W. sticker on my car. Like
you have one on your hydro flask.
Oh yeah, right here. So George W. Right? Like I think it's it seems like a neat guy. Anyway.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and so they were a part of a Connect group, and they kept talking about how they're like, yeah, we came to this church because Matt's a Democrat, and people were like, I
hate to be the one to tell you,
he's not, and but yeah, I think people will make assumptions because of stances I take and stuff. Okay, so let's talk conspiracy theories for a moment.
Bigfoot's real. Aliens exist, 100%.
Okay,
not a doubt in my mind.
This is so funny. So I'll address two things of that. We legitimately, I mean, there are 3 members of our staff that 100% believe Bigfoot is real.
I would venture to say it's more, and they're just chickens.
Okay, that might be true, but I mean, I know we've had one staff member that has seen Bigfoot, and again, one of our pastors,
really smart guy,
real smart guy, solid guy. That's like, I've seen him. Like, I don't know what else to say. We've had another staff member that has hunted him
for like years.
For years.
Yeah.
There's you, and then also the alien one. You guys told me about watching Unsolved Mysteries, the reboot of it.
Yeah.
We watched it. It was so funny. So they have one episode about aliens. Like, it's so convincing.
Yeah.
And it gets done, and my wife just like looks over to me, and I go, "So what do you think?" She goes, "I'm not buying it." So I thought that was like so funny. It was like the response that we talked about, like, no, like all this convincing stuff. No. Okay, so here, conspiracy theories, they just keep abounding more and more. So we're in a season right now where we've just added some layers to it. We have the virus. How real is it? Is it man-made? Is it China? Is it our government? Is it the Democratic Party trying to destroy the economy to attack the Republicans? Is it the Republicans doing it so that there won't be an election in November and President Trump can keep power? There's everything in between.
Sure,
Masks are, it starts with mask, and that leads to the vaccine, which leads to the mark of the beast.
Sure.
Bill Gates is trying to kill a third of the population.
Yeah.
He's partnering with Fauci.
Which he
Fauci. Right. So, I mean, I'm just saying, like, there's
Sure,
like a
yeah.
lot of things. And I'm smiling about it, and I hope no one that believes these things finds
Sure.
me being disrespectful. I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of them.
It's just the array of it that's almost makes you chuckle. Of like, there's a lot of thoughts out there. It's not even
Right.
that any of the one are singular that you'd be foolish to believe in them. There's just so much of information and theories. And I think that's where it's just the volume of it. I think is interesting.
So here's my problem with conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
So I'm coming from a biblical perspective. Is in order to believe most conspiracy theories, you have to really think the worst about a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because at the core of it, so I'm talking about like the major conspiracy theories. At the core of the thought is there's a person or a group of people that are trying to manipulate, lie, to oppress or to hurt or to gain some advantage. And so you have to, oftentimes without absolute proof, think the worst of people for the possibility that there might be something true. That feels really heavy on the heart.
Yep.
And so for me personally, I can choose to think the worst of people or I can choose to love them. I can't do both. And so for me, that's one of the reasons I have a really hard time with conspiracy theories is I'm not saying your argument's invalid, but if you can't prove it, if there's not absolute facts, that means for a season, I'm going to have to think the worst about people. And honestly, I just don't find that a good way to live. And so the people I see embracing conspiracy theories are oftentimes, they come across, maybe they're like super happy, but they come across on social media as some of the angriest, most unsettled, frustrated people. And oftentimes it's because they'll say that, I'm so angry, the phraseology they use. And I just think, like, honestly, I would say my loving heart toward them is to say, I feel bad for you.
Yeah.
That's where you're living, because I want to take a step back as a Christian and go, I really believe in the sovereignty of God. God has this under control. God knows how this story ends. He's in control.
That's so good.
And so that's the part of it where I go, I don't want to necessarily put my head in the sand, which some people will say, but I also just want to think the best, because that's a better way to live.
I have a very similar like place that I've landed where I generally do not believe in conspiracy theories, but I got there kind of differently. So for me, it was almost my acknowledgement of the fact that how broken we are and almost assuming the worst that led me to me thinking it's not even possible, which led me to a more healing place of finding and searching for the best in people, but almost living in this really deep-seated understanding and knowing of like the idea of a conspiracy theory in general. Let's talk about one that I really do believe is I don't want to be disrespectful on who believes in it, but it does feel like one of the more outlandish ones, like the earth is flat.
Right.
It's out there. That's
Right.
That's even a fringe of conspiracy theory. If that's, where it could be a little bit silly. And when I think about it, it's the volume of people that would have to be in on it is what always blows me away.
Right.
Everyone from like Red Bull put a guy in space. So the guy at Red Bull, the guy who went into space, everyone who ever had to do with anything. Right. And I really don't think so highly of people that they could all like keep that buttoned up.
Right.
People talk, like people aren't loyal,
Yeah,
people aren't
sure.
all these things. So me thinking most of the time conspiracy theories just because people loose lips sink ships. You know what I mean? Like there's no way like they're all just like
Right.
all of a sudden the best secret keepers in the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So from my perspective, I kind of landed in the same place, but it was just because thinking like I don't think people could do that, which like I said, brought me to a new place of healing of like, all right, if I can acknowledge people are the worst, can I still find goodness? And which is also anti-conspiracy theory. So that being said, you never know.
All right, so I'm going to pull up some of the comments from my post recently on Facebook, and I'm going to see if there's any more that we can talk about real quick. Why do you think there's a coin shortage? You have a thought on that?
Yeah, so I've heard some stuff.
I haven't heard anything.
So I've heard that they're working on they're using coronavirus as a like excuse to get rid of paper money, and without paper money, at any given moment, the government can decide who has what with no accountability. So
The cashless society. So the government's responsible for taking the coins.
Yeah. Well, so I genuinely don't know what's happening with the coin shortage.
Right. I'm asking
like
for the
that.
side of it.
That's what I've heard is like people have wanted a cashless society forever. Mostly probably for practical reasons. It costs more to make a penny than what a penny's actually worth. So you want to get rid of it. But the idea of the cashless society, the fear that people have is like, okay, if there's no more, if there's no more coins, if there's no more paper money, if it's all digitized, which I'm comfortable with because I'm a millennial and my life is online, right?
Right.
For many people, we're like, even people who've survived the Great Depression, they're still out there.
Right.
The cash is under the mattress. The idea of that not meaning anything or being, that's probably pretty scary.
All right. So our friend Joe Sutphin, he says black coffee or with cream.
Black coffee.
All right, I don't
Then
like
you
coffee
don't like
at
it at all, yeah.
I don't do coffee. Hobbit as one book or 3 films.
Okay, here's the problem. So
You gotta go quick on this. We gotta do
The
rapid
Lord of the
fire.
Rings should have been 6 movies. It was only 3. The Hobbit should have been 1 movie, and it was 3. And that was a mess up all
Okay,
around.
so you're saying less was more.
Less is more. They should have 1 Hobbit movie. It was the shortest book.
My response to Hobbit as 1 book or 3 films is no. Chocolate chip cookies with or without nuts.
I think if you put nuts, raisins, anything in a cookie, then you might not make it into heaven.
Mail-in ballots, yes or no?
Oh, man.
I'm just going to do rapid fire with
Yeah.
you.
No, don't mail them in. Go vote.
Go vote. I agree with that one. I think
It feels shifty. I don't know. I could be wrong. I really could be. I
yeah,
don't
it
know.
does feel shifty to me too. Driving in the correct lane. What should happen to people who drive slow in the passing lane?
You can get rid of their license.
Suspend it, right?
Suspend it.
Yeah.
That is so inconsiderate.
We should be able to do citizen's arrest, suspend their
Just
license.
start honking the horn, get them off
Yeah.
the road. So inconsiderate.
Should there be sports in the fall?
So selfishly, yes. But I know that makes me kind of probably not a great person.
Yeah.
But selfishly, I want there to be sports in the fall, even if they look different. But yeah.
More or less restrictions when it comes to immigration?
I think way less. Take it back to when my ancestors got here. Sign a piece of paper. They might not even get your name right. Doesn't just.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, a couple more. Someone said the Book of Romans is controversial.
Super controversial.
It is, isn't it? We're going to teach through it. We're going to teach through it here
Which
soon.
I'm
but
super excited about. Yeah.
I just love that was a response. My question was like, what are things that get people fired up? The Book of Romans. Okay, I got a couple more,
Which
and then we're going
100%
to end on one last seriousness.
Okay.
Is bacon really a good thing?
Bacon is phenomenal.
It is the best, right?
God loved us enough to give it to us. For sure.
All right. Someone just said Jim Harbaugh, and
It's trash.
yeah, I actually hold on. Let me unfriend this person. Okay, and then here's the last one: politics. And again, I hope this is just modeling for people like healthy discussions, different things. I'm looking through a lot of really good ones, and so a lot of these ones, I want people to know that commented. We're going to actually do one whole week dedicated to some of these topics. So there are other topics people might think like they missed these incredible topics. It's because we have them planned.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
All right, so politics is just the one that I think in the church world, and we really do need to, for time's sake, just go kind of quickly.
Sure.
So here's the world I was raised in. If you're a Christian, you're a Republican. If you're a Democrat, you're not.
Yeah.
I remember growing up in Detroit when my mom had to inform me that probably half of our church, so half our church was white, half was black. And I remember her saying to me, Matthew, I bet you half our church is Democrat. And I was like, no. I think I was a pastor on staff, already at that point. And I was like, no. And she was like, yeah. And I was like, I could not even fathom, because to me, there was the one issue. It was the abortion issue.
Yeah.
There's no way. And I think that's still, for many people, the dividing line is that one topic. There are other things that people can lean right or left, but that becomes the one. So people, again, have that tension. You are conservative in some areas, lean more left in other areas, but can you just take a moment and speak, coming from San Diego, which would have been, a lot of the Christians probably would have been Democrat.
Yeah.
Just speak to that for a moment so people can understand you can be a Christian and be on either side of the political party.
Yeah, so when I moved out to San Diego, it was jarring how many Christians were Democrats, and it didn't feel scandalous to me. It was just like, yeah, of course I am. Like, I'm a Christian, I'm a Democrat. And I remember thinking like, what? Like, because I grew up in the same place of almost, I couldn't comprehend you being a Christian, being a Democrat because of abortion. But after asking some questions, here's what I got nonstop from people. We believe that Jesus loved people. We believe that Democrats care about social safety nets and caring about the marginalized and the widow and the orphan. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, they identified more with liberals or Democrats, whatever you want to call them. And then abortion, once you get down to the nitty gritty, what I consistently got was abortion. Most of the time, every once in a while you get some pro-choice people, but most of the time, yeah, abortion's bad. It doesn't seem like it's going to change though, so I'll vote for the issues that I think more align with like how Jesus would have acted. What's funny is if you ask conservatives the same question, it's the same answer. It's why I think what aligns with Jesus is family values and like, you know, these traditional Judeo-Christian values that have been here since the founding of the country.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. They both think they're supporting the Christian mission, the Christian faith better. And it's just
right.
It's a
and we're going to talk
thing.
about abortion one week by itself. So we're good.
Yeah.
This is just kind of like a quick thing. I talked to a person that really opened my mind on this that said, I vote Democrat. I'm anti-abortion. I vote Democrat because I think when we put services in place that can help people in the problems of their life, we'll see abortions go down.
Yeah.
And their perspective was the Republican view was basically we're
anti-welfare,
right? And so the anti-welfare, the anti-helping, the anti-support is what's causing people to get more abortions.
Yeah.
So both Christian groups were saying, yes, we want less abortions, no abortions, it would be the idea, obviously, right? Less abortions, but how we think about getting there is different. Republicans more on the legal side, let's overturn laws, let's pass laws.
Yeah.
The Democrat side was more, let's create services that can help people so they don't need abortions.
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
it's so funny. Even the way that people talked in San Diego, or even any Christian who might be a Democrat, the reason they might look at a Republican and say, well, I can't be that as a Christian, is saying, well, they don't care about people so much. They obviously care about more than business, than humans. And most true capitalists that I know don't agree with that. Mm-hmm. Most true Republicans, they'll say like, no, I believe the best way to love people is a hands-off economy where it gives everyone equal opportunity. They both have great thoughts and great ways to get there. You and I have our own personal opinions on which ones are better, which ones are worse. But like the idea of painting them in a corner and saying they're evil or they're wicked or they're, is chaos to me. Yeah. Like it's an argument over how to love people best, which is a beautiful argument that should be happening, but it's over how to love people best, not good versus evil.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to end on one question. You can only say yes or no.
Okay.
All right? So don't give it an answer. Don't explain it. All right? No privacy. Are we in the end times?
No. just cold ending. Yeah. Just cut the camera off. What do you think? All right, no, you have to answer now. Yes or no? Are we in the end times?
No. Jesus will not come back in my lifetime.
Okay. I don't think so either. He could. It'd be... why not?
I just don't think.
But I don't think so either.
Yeah, I think it's going to get much worse.
However, completely candidly, and I'm ashamed to say this as a pastor, the Book of Revelation still freaks me out, and I read it very, very cautiously.
Yeah,
I got to be in the right headspace.
I just read it like a huge chunk of it again last night, and I was just like, "Yep, it's not going to happen in my lifetime." So that's going to anger so many people. That'll probably be the people are like, "I'm leaving the church."
Yeah, the Democrat Republican thing I'm fine with, but how?
Yeah, relation's out. All right, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.